It had only cost $4 million to build the ship. Freight rates shot up more than 1,000%, and within 6 months, he was $80 million richer. In business terms, he never looked back. He knew how to weather the storms of economic boom and bust. His fleet made money when there were wars in the Middle East, and rode out the oil embargoes of the 70s. To the very end, he was never to lose his flair for business. Outwardly, his family life seemed ideal. His wife Tina was a celebrated society beauty. Christian Dior made dolls' clothes for his daughter Christina. She and her brother Alexander had everything they wanted, except for one thing: the company of their father.
I mean, they had the most tremendous toys. I mean, I remember Alexander had a small racing car, and everybody, including Onassis, had to be careful because it might come out of nowhere roaring at you, and you had to jump into the shrubbery. Alexander had something like 25 suits. He sort of opened the thing. This is a small boy with all these beautiful suits made for him. As with many rich people, for every present you get, you know, your father's away for another 2 days.
As for his mother of his children, he loved her, but she was unfit to be Onassis' wife. Tina was too busy with herself than with her family. She never had the time for her children. She was frivolous. She was a butterfly.
His relationship with Tina was rather hard to work out. And I couldn't sleep one night, so I came down very quietly. And as I just passed the first floor, the doors were flung open, and I didn't see them, but I could see their shadows on the wall, as if on a screen, a shadow play of some kind. And I was looking there, and there was fearful row going on in Greek. And then suddenly I saw in the shadow the small, I think he was slightly smaller than she was, but drew back a fist and hit her. Oh! And so she made this noise. So I started to go down, and I went round the next thing, and I looked again and saw the shadow, and the shadow had changed from the woman going back and the fist, and they were clasped together, and the voices were saying what obviously in Greek was, "My darling, I love you," and they melded together and closed the doors and went in. So I don't know, by some standards you could say that was a happy marriage.
There was, however, another woman. Maria Callas was the most famous diva in the world.
And the pulling power of this one woman on this stage definitely fascinated him. Well, first of all, he devised the idea, obviously, of saying to his wife, let's invite the Callas and her husband, Meneghini, on the Christina, because she tried to resist going. And the husband sort of said, well, you do need a break. And that seduced her into it.
Onassis never has been connected with art because you know that he had some very bad experience about the collecting paintings. Therefore, collecting some people like Callas, it was much more important than having some paintings of good masters.
Onassis had always cultivated the company of celebrities, like Sir Winston Churchill. But Maria Callas was something different.
He was definitely drawn by La Callas, but the person he seduced was Maria, the woman. Then what did she see in Onassis? Well, when Greek meets Greek, boom, you know.
It was a bit too much. I mean, he brought the mistress right on the boat, which is par for a Greek marriage. Didn't shock me at all. It didn't shock my father. And my father did it all his life, that. But my mother wasn't Tina. Tina took umbrage and she left.
Onassis and Callas, the two most famous Greeks in the world, were for a time the two most famous lovers in the world. Tina's second husband was Sonny Blandford, the future Duke of Marlborough. Then, after her sister died, she became the fourth, Mrs. Stavros Niarchos. Legal difficulties prevented Callas getting a divorce. When they were removed, Onassis seemed delighted.
So I said, we were kidding. He said, well, you have become a signorina now. You won't be signora, you'll be signorina. So that took care of the whole problem.
Though she was finally free to marry, Onassis kept her waiting in the wings.
They had an argument, some sort of silly argument, and she left and went back to Paris. Well, I don't know about a woman's scorn, but a man walked out on, turned the tables on her, and he sets his eyes on a form of revenge, really, in wooing Mrs. Kennedy.
This concern to manage always to be with a lady who added something to him, perhaps is the only humility he has had in his life.
When he invited her to Scorpius, rumors began to fly, and paparazzi began to swarm.
It was just a rumor, and it wasn't anything close to news. But we knew that Jackie and Ted Kennedy were invited on Onassis' yacht at Scorpios, and that a Bouzouki group with a friend of mine, a singer called Yannis Poulopoulos, was invited to entertain the guests at the time. So I thought I would force my way into the group, pretend to be a guitar player, which I wasn't, put a Minox camera behind the chords of the guitar and hope to a scoop. Well, Jackie loved the party. I mean, she was ecstatic with the music, so when the music started to play and the people started to sing, she got up and she wanted to dance. And she attempted to throw a plate on the floor, and she picked the most expensive dinner plate. Onassis grabbed it in midair, called Dionisi, who was in charge of entertainment, said, "Bring the cheap plates out, Dionisi." And she kept breaking plates all night long. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning, and Jackie was long gone. Onassis had been drinking with the group and singing songs with the group. And then he looked at his watch and he said, "Fellows, I'll have to say goodnight. Gotta go down and take care of my wife." And that was the exact quote that I was expecting from him, because I knew from his friends that he was referring to Jackie as his wife, and the whole thing had been arranged. He saw in him a guy who knew how to enjoy life, how to spend his money really for that purpose. Onassis was, as I said, bigger than life. He was a contemporary Zorba the Greek. So it wasn't difficult to love him, and it wasn't difficult for Jackie to fall in love with the idea that she would be Mrs. Onassis.
The proposal of Mr. A.S. Onassis...
Marrying the widow of a democratic president put Onassis under the spotlight. He was working on a massive deal with the military junta, which had imposed fascism on Greece. Ever since Smyrna, he'd been cynical about all governments and had no patience with political questions from the press.
What the hell that has to do with what we are doing here? Will you tell me? Now, don't start this because I'm going.
I think ever since he married Jackie, everything turned bad for her. The Greeks are very superstitious people, and a lot of them said she was the Black Widow, and I thought it was rather unfair, but I'm very superstitious myself. I certainly wouldn't want to have been in Onassis' shoes.
Cracks began to show in the marriage. Onassis was horrified by Jackie's extravagance. She was spending more than her monthly allowance of $30,000 on clothes. Preparing the ground for a possible divorce, he actually leaked her shopping bills to an investigative reporter. It was a perfect marriage, joked his children. He loves names, and Jackie loves money. He was a loving father, but a domineering one, who broke up Christina's first imprudent marriage. He disapproved of Alexander's love affair with an older woman. But despite this, father and son were growing closer.
he was adoring Alexander. He was not loving Alexander. He was adoring Alexander, but in his own way.